We're now nearing the end of the parliamentary calendar with only 3 sitting weeks left in 2023. And for the Liberals, it is ending with a whimper, down to the mid-20s in popular support, with the opposition Conservatives well in the lead. With more, we're now joined by polls analyst Éric Grenier, the man behind the Writ. Hello, Éric.
Hello.
So let's begin with the numbers. Where do they sit right now?
Well, right now in the polls, we have seen that the Conservatives have been holding at around the 40% mark that we've now started to see really since the return of Parliament in September. And the Liberals are now usually about 15 points back, somewhere in the mid-20s at around 25%, followed by the New Democrats, who still are around the 19-20% mark that they've been at for the last few years. So we did see a lot of change earlier in the year, but over the last few months, it has been holding in what might become the new normal at this 40% for the Conservatives, 25% for the Liberals.
Okay, might be the new normal. Compare that with the beginning of the year. As you said, we were watching this trend line since January, but the Liberals are certainly worse off now than they were in January.
Yeah, absolutely. When we were in January, things weren't really all that different from where they were in the 2021 election. The Conservatives were usually polling at around 34, 35%. Pierre Poilievre had been leader for a few months, but it hadn't really seemed to move the numbers very much. The Liberals were at usually 31, 32, more or less where they were in the last election, and the NDP, notably, still at the 19-20% that they are now. So most of the change that we've seen has been between the Conservatives and the Liberals. When you're actually looking at how people voted in the past elections, you do see that the Liberals have lost some support to the New Democrats, but the NDP has lost some support to the Conservatives as well. But the net effect is that it's largely that the Conservatives have picked up 5-6 points and the Liberals have dropped 5 or 6 points.
Okay, and what's interesting is that this is the time of year as well when people start focusing on fundraising numbers. And when you look at that, they really do seem to be backing up what we're seeing in the popular polls.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the end of the year is always the best time for fundraising because it's the closest time for your tax credit will be coming when you file your returns in the spring. But so far, the Conservatives have already been having a great fundraising year. They've raised over $23 million since the beginning of the year. The Liberals are much further back at under $10 million. So there's about a $13.5 million gap between the Liberals and the Conservatives, and that is only the first 9 months of the year. Expecting that if those trends continue, that this will probably be a record-setting year for the Conservatives, both in terms of overall fundraising and their lead over the Liberals. So it is following in the popular vote, but we should also point out that when the Liberals won, in 2015 or 2019, the Conservatives were still able to raise a lot of money. So money doesn't necessarily buy you votes, but it certainly can help you buy quite a few, just not necessarily an election.
Absolutely. Now, we are getting word that the NDP is willing to extend the timeline for a pharmacare deal with the government. Of course, pharmacare, this key element of the NDP supply and confidence agreement with the Liberals. When you look at the NDP polling numbers and their fundraising numbers, what does that tell us, might even suggest as to why the party is willing to give the Liberals a bit more time when it comes to pharmacare?
Well, the NDP doesn't look like it is in a good position for an election. Its fundraising is not awful from an NDP's perspective. They're raising at about over $4 million so far this year, but they do not have a lot of extra cash. So the fundraising does not suggest that the NDP is able to build up a war chest over the last few months. And when you look at the polls, again, they haven't really moved at all. The fact that the Liberals have dropped so much and the NDP hasn't really picked anything up overall, when you're looking at the numbers across the country, does not put the NDP in a good position to win a lot more seats, because in a lot of the areas where the Liberals have dropped back and the NDP might seem more competitive with them, at the provincial level, the Conservatives have gained. And so the NDP might be able to trade off some gains from the Liberals for some losses to the Conservatives. But there's very little chance, based on where the numbers are right now, that the NDP would actually come out ahead if an election were held today.
Okay. Now, the Liberals have brought in a new communications director, getting back to the challenges they face. So here is a new communications director, but is it too late to turn numbers around for the government, or is there still a chance that a change in some type of strategy might still be beneficial for the party?
Well, I suppose it would not be, based on where things have been going for the last little while, a good idea just to continue. So a change can't hurt the Liberals based on how badly things have been over the last little while. But I think that the biggest issue for the Liberals is that a lot of the things that could see them get reelected in the next election are much bigger, much larger issues based around whether the economy improves, whether interest rates go down, whether Pierre Poilievre can continue to have a bad week and bad months like he did last week. Those are things that are largely out of the Liberals' control. Tinkering around the edges might help, but really they need some much bigger bounces to go their way over the next year or two, depending on how long this Parliament will last.
Okay. Well, we are watching. Éric Grenier, always good to chat with you. Thank you for that.
All right, thanks.